All right, it's episode 1 of the To Be Named Later podcast. I do not have a name for this currently, but I do have ideas for what I want to do with this podcast. It will be in kind of podcast format, sort of 45-minute to an hour long videos cut up into shorter clips. I'll also be posting on this channel, but it's my first time doing any sort of YouTube channel like this, so if it seems a little rough around the edges, then that's why. But I do have some interesting ideas that I think are valuable. So although the delivery may not be perfect every time, I do think that my ideas, and of course who doesn't narcissistically, but anyways, today I have some pretty good topics I want to talk about. First, today there was a Ukrainian press conference from the American military officials. That's kind of odd, isn't it? How many times has a country ever given press briefings on a war that they're not directly involved in? I think that shows directly that we are involved in it. But it was sort of a continuation of the lies pushed forward by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. He ran this press conference with another Biden admin. I don't know his name. But it was sort of more of the norm, I guess. More of fake narratives, more of anything that will keep people interested in this war that has been lost from day one. Insane comparisons to World War II were perpetrated during this press conference. It's pretty insane to compare this to World War II in any form or fashion. There's no authoritarian, fascist demagogue wrecking Europe, but that's exactly who they compare Putin to. Putin is Hitler to the deep state and to the United States. Which is probably the worst insult you could give any Russian, comparing them to Hitler. The U.S. likes to say that World War II was 100% our victory and nobody else's. They don't like to mention how many lost soldiers Russia had and how Russia had to fight Hitler out of its own backyard, per se. So any sort of comparison of Putin to Hitler it's just a massive insult to the Russian country. But I continue. The military-industrial complex is continuing to get rich off this war, so they will push any narrative that will keep people interested in this war. I do think that PR war is slowly coming to a halt. Of course, you'll always have the far, far left that will never, ever, ever give up on the Ukrainian war. But I do think the middle ground is slowly realizing what's going on here. And when I say the military-industrial complex, that's kind of it's a term, it's a broad term that's used, and a lot of times people don't even know what they mean when they say it. But there are specific companies, defense manufacturers who publicly are getting rich off this war. Obviously the BlackRocks, the Boeings, Northrop Grumman's, though they are getting extremely rich off of this war. And the Ukraine war is a perfect scenario for them. They don't have to use any American lives. They don't have to directly get U.S. involved in the war. It's the perfect proxy for them. They can use Ukrainian men of all generations, and they're slowly running out and going towards women now. They can put them through the meat grinder, and they can continue to use this as a proxy against Russia to fight Russia without directly fighting Russia, and they're losing. We're losing. It's not the U.S. directly. It's not the U.S. military directly fighting Russia, but it's our weapons, it's our money, it's our attention. When you look at like NATO's funding this war, 75 to 80%, probably more. I don't have the direct numbers on that. Is America, and that's the story with NATO as a whole. America holds the line and carries the brunt more than anybody else in NATO. But it's not NATO's war to begin with. I mean, Ukraine is not a NATO member. And if you look at the rhetoric, Kamala Harris and NATO itself likes to say that Ukraine, you will be a part of NATO when this is over. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. That indirectly is kind of a declaration of World War III, if you think about it, because they want Ukraine to be a member of NATO so badly. They want to be in this war so badly. But they start the statement by saying, we don't want a direct conflict with Russia. We don't want it for the Russians or for us. But we want Ukraine a part of NATO. So we want this to be our war, is what they're saying. So if you look at it through that lens, the United States has been fighting Russia directly for a while. Not directly. It's not our men fighting the Russians, but this is our war. And if you want any proof that this is our war, we're having our defense secretary give press briefings on another country's war. So that's really our war. And which is insane. I don't remember a time if this has ever happened, but it's out of control and criminal. The Ukrainian war is the biggest money laundering scheme we've seen in the U.S. It's hard to say ever. At least for a while. This is the biggest one. The amount of people getting rich off of this war and lying, not only in the U.S., but in Ukraine, there's no telling where the funding has gone to. I mean, I can't say a name because I just saw this clip. There's a Ukrainian official who is the youngest European to own this. I believe it was a Porsche. I may be wrong on that, but that's a sign of who's getting rich off of this war. Do you think all the money that we send them is going to the war front? If so, this has been a stalemate for a long, long time. This war has been a stalemate for a long time. Our money is not breaking Ukraine for helping them make progress. So where's the money going to? Why is there a continuation of this funding if there's no changes in the war? And they're not going to say that out loud, but it's been a stalemate for months, probably years. So why are we continuing to fund a losing effort? Because people are getting rich off it. People are getting filthy rich off it. And if you look at the comparison of what's going on in Israel, which we'll get into later, it's different, but not really, because we're trying to halt Israel. We're trying to stop them from continuing to go forward. We want another forever war. That's what we want. Any sort of war we can get involved in and our defense contractors can get rich off of it, we're going to have it go as slowly as possible. This goes into why NATO expansion is so important to NATO and to the United States. Well, to the United States more than NATO, because NATO is America's puppy. But every single country that joins NATO has to conform to the NATO weapons criteria, and it's American defense contractors. So they get funded and they get rich if more countries join NATO. That's why NATO originally was supposed to be to protect Europe from a post-Cold War Russia from becoming a demagogue and taking over Europe. When Russia tries to join NATO in 2000, that says there's no need for NATO anymore, right? Congratulations, we won. We can go home. We can celebrate. But no, we tell Russia, no, you can't join NATO. Why would you? This is for us to fight you, to constantly provoke you. Why would we want you to join that? We can't get rich off of that. We don't want peace. We want money. So that the whole meaning of NATO is to get these defense contractors and criminal members of the United States shadow government rich. And this is an issue because we have people in the backgrounds making decisions for our country that are hurting our country, not promoting peace, not promoting less conflict, not promoting saving lives worldwide, because this is not just an American issue. This is a worldwide issue. I mean, Ukraine has lost a generation of men off of a losing war. It's criminal. It's disgusting. And Ukrainians who have any idea of what's going on and how they're being used to be slaughtered for another country's agenda, getting other people rich in another country, it's disgusting. And I really think a lot more of Ukrainians and Americans are realizing this. Not only, but worldwide are realizing this. But the United States will not give up that narrative. Why? Because then that will show, in a way, we lost to Russia. And we will never, ever admit that. And this press conference given today, it's not a good sign of progress. It's showing that the U.S. is doubling down. They will not give in. They will hold the line until Russia makes a false step, and then NATO can get involved, and it can be a full-on conflict. But Russia's not going to. They've had many chances to. Even in Putin's interview with Tucker, he even talked about how it's kind of common knowledge how NATO and the West members of military have been involved in this directly in Ukraine. Maybe not fighting directly. I mean, maybe they are. But at least that we have direct members of our military in NATO, and they're advising Ukraine in bunkers for a while, probably since the war has even started. So if you're Putin and you know that U.S. special forces and NATO special forces are directly have their high-ranking officials in Ukraine helping Ukraine in this war, I mean, how much more of that is a direct declaration of war between the U.S. and NATO and Russia? I mean, what else do you need? He's had many reasons to take this up, and I'm not a Putin supporter, okay? Obviously, he is an authoritarian dictator, right? But in this direct sense, he's had many reasons to escalate this to directly hit Western countries, and he hasn't. But we want him to because that gives us validation and a reason to have a direct war with Russia. Direct war with Russia and direct war with Iran are two of the biggest priorities in the military-industrial complex and these people who are running our country in the shadows. That's what they want. They want that. They get rich off that. They don't care what lives are lost. Why would they care? They don't have to go fight that battle. Your sons and daughters will. People my age will, and they can get rich off of our flesh. So, and I wanted to talk about French President Macron. He has said some highly, what's even the word? Offensive, alarming. He's pushed some highly offensive and highly alarming narratives of NATO being directly involved in this war against Russia. How can he get away with that? How is he allowed to spew such disgusting warmongering narratives? He wants a bloodbath. That's what he wants. He wants a bloodbath, and he wants NATO involved. But then you have to ask yourself, does he really want it, or is he being told to say it? By who? The United States, probably. NATO. NATO is, like I said earlier, just the United States puppy in a way to expand power in Europe and provoke Russia. That's what it is, and make money off it. But when you have French President Macron saying stuff like that, it makes you wonder, what are the talks deep inside of NATO? What are they saying behind closed doors? Are they looking for ways to get directly involved in this? Is that why they keep adding more countries, like Hungary, I believe it was, and Sweden recently, like weeks ago? It's just something to think about, and it's what makes this election even more consequential. This election could stop World War III, and I'm not being exaggerative when I say that, okay? If you have a president and President Biden who will not let go of this war, who will not admit it's time to put an end to this. President Trump is the only president since Bush who hasn't started a war or any conflict during his presidency. Number one on his agenda, with other things, probably 1A or 1B, whatever, would be to put an end to this war and get a peace settlement. It's time. It's been time. It was time before this war even started, when we're stupidly saying we want Ukraine to join NATO. I mean, how dumb is that? Just say you want a world war at that point. You know that's going to provoke Russia to invade. And I'm not saying it was the right choice, but that's just the fact. If you're going to say you want Ukraine to join NATO, you're calling for Russia to do something to stop it. And it hasn't worked because we're still we haven't learned that. I mean, so this election is even more consequential in that matter because we need a president who will come in and put an end to this reckless and meaningless conflict. It's been, like I said, it's been a stalemate for so long. All we're doing is killing more and more Ukrainians and Russians, for that matter. So that press conference today was really, I mean, it's not shocking, obviously, but it's just another reason to be discouraged about that front, that war, the war in Ukraine. I don't see any stopping to it anytime soon, obviously. I don't think anybody with common sense would, because if it was going to stop, it would have stopped a long time ago. The only way for it to stop is to get Biden out and get these criminal people who are running our country in the shadows and have been for a while, hold them accountable. They're not going to do this anymore. They're not going to wreck our country like this anymore. So we'll see what happens on that front. There was an interview with Elon Musk and Don Lemon, which was pretty funny. I'm really shocked this interview even happened. I'm really shocked that Elon Musk even said yes to this interview. I haven't watched the full interview. I've seen many clips of little segments of what they were talking about, certain things like free speech, DEI, the border. So, but the main thing I think is most important from this interview is the free speech part of it. Don Lemon is claiming he's a champion of free speech, and Elon's basically saying, you want free speech, or you want to get rid of free speech, you want to control speech so bad that you can taste it. The left and the people on the left, their ability to lie and gaslight is astounding. It's amazing. But this is one of those areas when you talk about free speech. I also when talking about this, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said, well, there's a Supreme Court case dealing with free speech and the government's role to control it, and whether the government should control it, and how much of a say should the government have in this, and how much control should the government have over social media and what people are saying. And she basically said that it's troubling that the First Amendment is hamstringing the government from suppressing free speech and controlling free speech. Yeah, that is the whole point of it. That's the whole point of having free speech. So the government can't control your speech. That's the whole meaning behind the free part in it. We have a Supreme Court justice saying that it's troubling that free speech is hamstringing the government from controlling speech. That the First Amendment is doing that. Duh. That's the whole point of it. So, when you have people like Don Lemon who wants to control, they like to hide it behind that the government has a responsibility to control speech, because speech is dangerous. It's so dangerous. That narrative is dangerous. You can't say that. It will cause this and this, and this will happen. You can't say that. That's dangerous. Words are words. Okay, I think that's really important to acknowledge in today's era, today's world. Words are words, and that's it. Words are simply words. You can choose to not listen to them. You can choose to ignore them. You could choose to not give them any power because you're an adult and that's what you do when people say things that you don't agree with. You don't shut them up because they're dangerous. Well, then I could say the same about your words. Your words are dangerous, and then you shouldn't be able to say anything either. But if you notice, the people who are calling for the suppression of speech is from the left. The right isn't calling for that, and it all boils down to freedom against government control. That was the whole point of the revolution, was to have less government. Our founding fathers believed in less government, more freedom of the people. That's the whole reason why the states have so much power, is to give the government less power. If there's any way the government can control people less, it should be, we need to go down that route. It's the same thing with gun control, name any issue really boils down to that. Do you want more government control, or do you want more freedom for the people to make up their own minds? This is what that boils down to. The controlling of the narrative. They don't trust people to think what they would think is correct. They want you to think this way. And anything against that is dangerous. Having a Supreme Court justice say something like that is really troubling. I don't think anything will happen. I think the Supreme Court will rule correctly in this case. But it's just an illustration of where we're going as a country. Words are words. Words cannot be made more than that. Words are powerful. They're important. But they're at the end of the day, they're words, okay? You could choose to ignore it. You can choose to not listen to it, like I said earlier. Just because somebody disagrees with what you're saying doesn't mean that those words are dangerous. So I think that was really the most important part of this. And also the obsession with race. Don Lemon is obsessed with the fact that he's black. And any sort of disagreement, you're racist. Because I'm black, you don't agree with me, you're racist. He said something after the interview. He talked about Elon's not used to people that look like him pushing back on him. I mean, the obsession with race to begin with is the perfect route of division, and have us fighting amongst each other because we can't control our race, obviously. But we're more alike than we are different. And I'm not saying isolated instances of this don't exist, but the moment we stop obsessing with race, the less it will become an issue. I could say the same thing about DEI, which was also talked about. And Elon talked about how if we lower the standards for doctors, that eventually more people will die. And Don Lemon just couldn't get that. He couldn't understand that. He couldn't fathom that. He couldn't understand it. And I think the whole point of DEI in the first place is sexist and racist, because you're saying that black people or any people of minority or women they can't get the job on their own. So we need to help them. That's the people who are pushing DEI in the first place are racist and sexist for thinking that black people and any people, minorities or women, that they need that help. Why do you think they're pushing that? To eliminate and get rid of white people in those settings. Which also, I hope I don't need to tell you, is also racist. But the whole point of DEI in the first place is discriminatory, because you're claiming that these people need help. They can't do it on their own. They need us to help us. You don't want black people being doctors. You don't want women pilots. You don't want any of the... No, I could care less who's flying my plane. I could care less if there's a minority doctor doing a surgery on me. I just want them to be able to pass the same standards as everybody else. And it's not the issue of the color of their skin or their gender. I want a doctor or a pilot who's good at their job and passed, not because they're women or because they're black, but because they're good at their job. You're racist for even thinking that. You would rather... You really would rather crash your plane with a black pilot than get to your destination safely? These people would. I would rather get safely with a black pilot, frankly. And you thinking that those people need help to get the job, how dare you for even saying that? That is disgustingly racist. And I'm not going to be told I'm racist for disagreeing with your racist and sexist thing to begin with. So it was a good inside look. These people, they're dumb, obviously, but they don't understand the irrationality in saying that those people need help to get in the first place because they can't do it on their own. That's what they're saying. Another part of this interview I really thought was interesting was Don Lemon's inability to understand Musk's claim that illegal immigration benefits the left. And so Elon was basically saying that bringing more people in benefits the Democrats because they sit into Democratic cities and then get more representatives in Congress based off the census numbers and population. And Don Lemon's response was talking about how the Electoral College is basically giving a definition of the Electoral College. It like has nothing to do with what Elon was saying. It's like, okay, yeah, that what you said is right, but it has nothing to do with what I'm saying. Illegal immigration is part of the reason the left wants it so badly is voters, obviously, to raise the census numbers in areas and they get more representation in Congress. And if you really want to go down a dark route, our military is extremely low on numbers. It could be that they're wanting to up our census and up our population numbers for a draft. And if we do have a direct conflict with, say, Russia or Iran or some of the like, China. But I don't need to tell you that illegal immigration benefits one party and one party only, and that's the left. Because they're going to come and they're going to vote for Biden. They're going to raise the census. They're going to raise the population in Democratic-run areas. But Don Lemon, he couldn't click. It didn't click with him. So if you have a chance to go watch this interview, go watch it. It's a really good interview. Elon doesn't hold back his. He doesn't hide his dislike for Don Lemon even to his face. So, but I think those topics were really, really interesting. All right. Let's talk about Israel for a second. I can sense this is going down a really bad path, the situation in Israel. Not because Israel's losing the war, actually the contrary. They're winning the war, and it seems the United States is doing everything in our power to stop them from winning the war, to put it to a halt. There was a hot mic after the State of the Union where Biden said him and Bibi are going to have a come to Jesus meeting over the lack of aid being given to Palestinians. Also, they're trying to stop Israel from conducting military missions. For some reason, Israel going into Rafah and eliminating Hamas members in Rafah, they're not allowing it. Obviously, they're doing it for a reason. Hamas members are using that as a hideaway. But the Biden administration is claiming that Israel has a responsibility to protect citizens, to protect Palestinians. Why? I'm not saying they should go in and mow them down, obviously. But if you disagree with the fact that these aren't Israeli citizens. Israel is going above and beyond. And the left, anybody who is pro-Palestine or anti-Israel will disagree with this and call you all sorts of names for saying this. But the truth is that Israel is going above and beyond to protect innocent civilians. Dropping leaflets, telling people to leave, telling people we're about to invade, get out. Who's stopping them? Hamas is stopping them from doing that. Hamas is lining up trucks along roads of innocent civilians escaping and shooting at them. You're not allowed to leave. You are our human shields. How is this going to help us if you leave if we put you in harm's way and then you die, we can point the finger at Israel. We need you to stay and die for us. You're not allowed to leave. Why would we let you leave? We can't win the PR war if you leave and go to safety. But then when innocent civilians die, get in the crosshairs of killing terrorists, Israel is made the bad guy. They're committing genocide. Hamas is using this. Hamas is winning the PR war, hands down, without question. Israel's being slaughtered on the PR front. But the Biden administration is helping that. The Biden administration is caving to the pressure from Hamas and from the left. The left's young voters are pressuring the Biden administration. They're trying to play both sides of the fence. Israel does not have a responsibility to those people, okay? When Hamas comes in and barges through Israel's border and rapes their women and kills their children, which all try to get debunked, proven true from the UN. When that happens, Israel has a right to defend itself. Obviously, they don't need to go in and kill civilians, but it's not their responsibility to make sure they're safe to start with. It's their responsibility to avoid, to not kill innocent civilians directly. But if Israel is going above and beyond to tell innocent civilians, get out, we don't want to hurt you, get out of harm's way so we can do our job, and then Hamas stops them from doing that, and then innocent civilians are killed, it's not Israel's fault, it's Hamas's fault. But yet, Israel is getting the target and the blame from anti-Semitism, which is astonishingly rampant worldwide. All these anti-Semites just came out of the hiding, essentially, when this war started. And it was shocking and disgusting how many of them are in our country, but also worldwide. So Israel is obviously going to lose the PR war, okay? But the actual war, Israel's winning. And obviously, the Israeli military and the military officials want to go into Rafah for a reason. They're not just bloodthirsty animals. Oh, the Palestinians are escaping to Rafah. We got to go in and kill all of them. Obviously, they're going to give them a way out. But the U.S. does not. The U.S. wants to stop that. Because the United States claims that Israel has no way to house these people and feed these people. Israel doesn't have a responsibility to house and feed Palestinians. They have a responsibility to not kill innocent civilians and get them out of the way, which they're again and again tried to do, like I said. But if Hamas is running Palestine, like they were voted in to do, it's their responsibility to do that, not Israel's. Israel has a responsibility to its own people to protect its own country because its own country was invaded and they were slaughtered. Innocent civilians were slaughtered by Hamas. They have a right to kill those people and remove that threat for its own country, for its own people, for its own right to exist, which none of the countries around Israel who are against Israel even accept. They don't accept Israel's right to exist. Israel does not have a right to exist to them. They need to be wiped off the face of the earth. I like this hypothetical when it comes to the situation in the Middle East. If Israel laid down their weapons and its enemies didn't, what would happen? Israel would be slaughtered and wiped off the face of the earth within a day. If you flip that and Israel's enemies laid down their weapons and Israel didn't, nothing would happen. And that's, people would say otherwise because they're lying and they want to push a narrative, but it's the truth. Who has been on the starting end of all of Israel's conflicts? It's always been Israel's enemies, not Israel. Whenever Israel responds, they get the brunt of the blame and they get attacked for defending its own country and defending its own people. But the United States, it's disgusting. The United States is openly and publicly going against an allies leader, an elected allied leader, may I add, openly going against them in a time of war is disgusting. And what they're doing is they're trying to win back over their young voters. They're caving to pressure while also funding Israel. So it's really sickening. Israel needs our back in this because unlike Ukraine, right? This is a winnable war, and Israel actually has a right to fight this war because they were invaded. Obviously, Ukraine was invaded too, but we helped push Ukraine up to the forefront to get invaded. We're using them as our human shield, like Hamas is using its civilians. But Israel is winning the war. We can continue to fund a winning war of our ally, which is a war that they have a right to fight, and they're defending themselves against people who don't even think they have a right to exist. They need our support. Not if Israel was losing this war and there was no really way to win it to begin with, then peace settlements would be the way to go. But Hamas and Iran and its proxies give us no reason to think that any sort of peace is attainable with them, because they don't accept Israel's right to exist. There's no peace to be made with people who don't think you have a right to exist as a nation, because any sort of deal made is going to be a trap. So the only way to win this war and the only way to go is to eliminate Hamas, period, the end. Hezbollah as well, but we'll cross that bridge. It's a lot bigger fish to fry. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But right now, Hamas needs to be eliminated. And Israel's really already fighting a war with Hezbollah. It's just not an official declared war. So it's really upsetting. And you have to ask yourself, is the U.S. looking for a potential coup to go on here? Just like we saw in Ukraine, to get a pro-Western and we wanted leaders in there who were going to live and die with us, and we're going to do what they say, and willing to sacrifice and kill their own people, and to start a war with Russia, which is an unwinnable war to begin with, because we tell them to. We don't want a peaceful Ukrainian government. We don't want we don't want an anti-war Ukrainian government, because how are we going to get rich off that? If you look the same way here, Netanyahu is looking to defeat Hamas, and for some reason, the U.S. doesn't want that, it seems, and we're looking to get a new member in there to lead Israel. If we get a pro-Western, pro-American that will do what America says, period, the end, black and white, there's no other way to think about it. If we get somebody like that to lead Israel, to take commands from us about a war that we're not directly in, just like what's happening in Ukraine, like I said, Israel's existence is at stake. And I don't say that lightly, because the U.S. will cave to pressure like it's doing now, and will seek deals, and will stop they'll mess around. Okay, let's not go too hard. We need to slow it down. We need a ceasefire. We need to get aid to the Palestinians, which will go directly to Hamas like it has for years, for decades. And Israel will get put right into a trap, and they can get wiped off the face of the earth. They're surrounded by enemies that are capable of doing that. So it's really important that that doesn't happen. But yet again, we see the U.S. is doing something like that, putting governments in elsewhere that are beneficial to us. They don't care about Israel. They care about the United States. Even though they say they care about Israel, if they really cared about Israel like they say they do, they will let Israel do its job and defeat Hamas. Currently, they're not. They're hamstringing them. I also want to talk about the aid a little bit. If you look at the past decades, Palestine is one of the more heavily funded places on earth of aid. They are given aid more than anybody else in the world. And yet you look, Hamas got stronger and the Palestinians got poorer. What does that tell you? Hamas is getting the aid, not the people who are intended to get the aid. Why would that be any different now? For establishing this port in Gaza with no boots on the ground, no monitoring of where the aid is going, who's saying that Hamas won't just get the aid again and get stronger? That's why Israel is so hesitant to give aid, because they know what happens when you give aid. It ends up in Hamas's hands. Just like whenever there was push to get citizens in Gaza fuel, and then Israel posted a satellite image of all the fuel that Hamas is keeping for itself, enough to keep all the citizens in Gaza going and keep them running, Hamas keeps it all for itself because it's not for the Palestinians, it's for Hamas in defeating Israel. So why are we going to give them more aid to help them even more? Unless there's a direct and good way to monitor the aid and make sure that the citizens in Gaza, the Palestinians, get the aid and not Hamas, by all means. But there's no reason to think that. They haven't proven to us that there's a reason to do, or there's a way to do that. Because Hamas over decades has done the exact opposite. They've gotten the aid for themselves and not given it to the people who really need it. But like I said, the Biden administration is caving to pressure here. There's not a genocide going on. Israel's going above and beyond trying to keep innocent civilians alive and keep them out of harm's way. Hamas is stopping that from happening. So it's something to keep an eye on. The Netanyahu versus Biden butting of heads it's the last thing that needs to be going on right now. Especially, there's a lot of protests within Israel against Netanyahu. You could argue that he's using this for political gain to stay in office. You know what? My thing is, the West cannot hijack this and get somebody in there who is going to just blindly say yes to the U.S. because this is not the U.S.'s war. This is Israel's war. They can't allow that to happen. You have to get a pro-Israeli, I mean, that can come solve it. A pro-Israeli for an Israeli leader, not a pro-American and what America's going to tell you to do leader. You need a pro-Israeli leader leading the country and doing what's best for Israel, not what's best for the U.S. So it's just something to keep an eye on over the next coming weeks. Who knows what will happen? We're establishing this port in Gaza, like I said, without boots on the ground. I don't know how that's going to benefit anybody but Hamas. But they're trying to play both sides of the coin, like I said, and show that we're doing something. Even though it's a facade of we're doing something, we're really just helping Hamas because we're stupid. So that's something to keep an eye on, like I said. I hope this episode went well. I hope I didn't go too fast. I'll get better at this the more I do it. Like I said, this is the first episode. Haven't done many long-form speeches like this. But yeah, also the quality of equipment. Right now I'm kind of running off of low-quality equipment, I guess you could say. I mean, quality enough to get the job done, but obviously if this gets bigger and we get some more traction going, the quality will up itself a bit. But for now, I hope it was enjoyable. I hope you enjoyed watching, and whether you agree or disagree, I don't care. I'm fine if you want to watch, if you disagree. But yeah, catch you guys next time.